Hey, where's the green room?
I need a lot of help.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Angie Newsome with Carolina Public Press. I'm the director, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what's going to happen today and who we are. Carolina Public Press, we are an online nonprofit news organization. So we focus on in-depth and investigative reporting on issues that are really important to Western North Carolina, public interest issues such as education, the environment, the economy, state and local politics, etc. So if you haven't checked us out, please do. We're at carolinapublicpress.org. We're really happy to have all of you, both y'all that are here and those of you who are joining us online through our live stream. So this is the first time we're live streaming an event. Really excited to be able to offer that to people who can't and perhaps don't want to drive to Asheville this early in the morning, but still want to participate. So what's going to happen today is that Frank Taylor, who's our managing editor, is going to moderate our panelists, a conversation with our panelists for about 35 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A from all of you who are here. And those of you who are with us remotely, post to our Facebook page or tweet us or post on to our page at carolinapublicpress.org, and we'll be monitoring all of those and hopefully get those questions answered as well. So thank you again for coming, and let me introduce to you. Yeah, let me
Making sure our phones don't go
Yes,
off.
right. We have a saying in our office, it's like, phones on. News never stops. Okay, so Alan Nicholas, who we're really excited to welcome him both to Western North Carolina and to welcome him today. He's the forest supervisor with the U.S. Forest Service here in Asheville, but he covers all the forests in North Carolina. Director Roderick Simmons, he's with the Asheville Parks and Rec. So we have a local representative for some of the local public lands that are here in Asheville. And Gordon Warburton, who's the ecoregion supervisor with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. We're very excited to have these three amazing gentlemen with us today. Very knowledgeable, so go for it. Ask them the hard questions. So thank you again, and I will probably signal Frank when it's time for y'all to ask questions. So thank you again for being here. Frank, and this is Frank Taylor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Angie. Well, I just want to add a little bit to what Angie was telling you about Carolina Public Press in relation to the issues we're going to be addressing today regarding public lands. Jack Eigelman has really been our lead reporter on a lot of public lands issues, particularly looking at the federal level as we have an ongoing process with the Forestry Service developing master plans for the two national forests in Western North Carolina right now. Jack is not able to be with us today, but he has a major report coming out next week that I encourage you to look forward to, and he'll be looking at resolutions that counties and towns have passed expressing their will on what the future federal wilderness management in Western North Carolina should look like. And I think that'll be a very fascinating piece to those who are interested in these land management issues. I also will be working on a piece that should be coming out, one piece will be coming out next week, I believe, and some within the next month, looking at a local park. It's not in Asheville, but it's a telling situation about how local parks can matter, not always in a positive way. There's some controversy over a park in one of our surrounding counties, and when we began to ask questions about their use of federal money and about the correspondence that's gone on in creating this park, they got some substantial state and federal grants. We discovered that people were omitting their emails, which is not really a good thing to see in local officials. So we'll be reporting on that, and we're talking with our lawyer about recording those public records that are being withheld right now. So as we get into these public lands issues, we expect Carolina Public Press to continue to report on issues like these and surrounding these over time. I do want to tell everybody, you all may be aware, our site crashed pretty badly about a week ago, and we're back up. So if you had stopped checking because we were not working well, we were sluggish and then just died, we're back. And would invite everybody to go take a look at what we've been doing. We had some reporting this week that I think everybody will find interesting on new developments in the debate over the effect of coal ash on public health. And we've also done some additional reporting on education and other issues. As I talked to each of you, we introduced you by name, but could each of you tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you do, and just go across the panel. Start with Gordon.
Yes, my name is Gordon Warburton, and I am the Mountain Ecoregion Supervisor. And so the ecoregion we're talking about basically with the Wildlife Commission is the western 22 counties. And I know I don't look this old, but I've been working for the Wildlife Commission for 34 years. And all of that, I have been great fortune to live in Marion, North Carolina through all the different things that I've done. And most of my career has been spent with the land conservation, land management side of the equation, although I did a brief stint in the middle for 10 years as the Black Bear project leader for the state. And I went to North Carolina State University for my master's degree, and I studied bears just below here in the Pisgah Ranger District near Brevard. And my claim to fame is that I was the first person in the state of North Carolina in 1981 to put a radio collar on a black bear in the state. And now in Asheville we've got 40 of these things, but I started the whole thing. So you can blame me for the bears or give me credit for the bears. But no, and so now as an ecoregion supervisor, I've been doing that since about 1998, and I administer our game lands program, boating access areas, and other public use facilities associated with the Wildlife Commission. And when I started out, we had about maybe 10 or 11,000 acres of state-owned game lands, and now we're up over 100,000 acres of state-owned areas. And the really exciting part, you look back on your career, I'm not going anywhere, but you look back on your career and what are the things that you've done that mattered. And to me, we have been the Wildlife Commission has been an amazing player in the landscape conservation puzzle. And when the land conservancies are looking for somebody needs to take this land, and well, we can't because of this. I'll give it to the Wildlife Commission; they'll take it, and we have, and we've got the land before we got the people and all the thing. But we're like the land. You've got to move with the land, and so we are the largest state government landowner here, and we've got 500,000 acres of game lands, state-owned game lands in the state. So, but we've really been very, very happy to and proud to be a major player in the conservation puzzle, and so I've got a lot of folks out here, and of course the major game land for us is cooperating with the United States Forest Service, and I won't steal any of Alan's material here, but we've been a long time cooperator with the U.S. Forest Service, all of their Forest Service lands, and we have agreements to cooperatively manage the wildlife resources on the federal lands, and we respect each other's purveys, but we work together to try to do the best job we can for fish and wildlife resources on the Forest Service lands.
Well, Roderick Simmons, I didn't rustle bears or collar.
We can arrange that.
Just a municipal employee. Roderick Simmons, as I said, I've worked in local government for 26 years. I've been in Asheville for the last 9. I've worked at the city of High Point, the city of Fayetteville, Sampson County, and now in the mountains. And this is probably by far my favorite place to work. If I'd have known that, I would have been here a long time ago. Kind of what we do, we provide municipal recreation services, which is a little different than the federal services, but we have 70 facilities, 54 of them are public parks. So a city our size, we have a tremendous amount of public space that's used by the community that we manage. We have the Nature Center, we have the golf course with McCormick Field, we have 7 community centers, we have 3 swimming pools, and 2 regional parks, Cary Park and Azalea Park. Those are our big ones. So we manage a lot of public space, trying to provide those quality of life things that citizens enjoy. We also have greenway trails that go throughout the city. Part of our struggle has been we're not able to expand anymore with annexation, leaving the city. So the land that we have now, we have to manage because we can't expand our boundaries, which that puts kind of pressure on the tax base. So deciding what properties come off from development versus what stays public, recreational areas to enjoy is a struggle for us with that. But we also work with Buncombe County and a lot of community groups. We work with Riverlink and Greenworks and a lot of the local groups to be able to provide sustainable environment. So that's pretty much the basis of our program.
Morning, I'm Alan Nicholas. I'm the forest supervisor for the National Forest in North Carolina. That would include the Nantahala, Pisgah, the Uwharrie, and the Croatan over on the coast. So kind of got a lot of pieces of ground scattered between here and in the coast. Basically, when you think about my job, I'm an administrator. I'm responsible for the management of people, personnel, and projects, working in coordination and partnership with a wide variety of NGOs. I come to you from Southern Illinois, where I was there for 13 years, and my experiences kind of carried me through the Southeast and Mississippi, South Carolina, and kind of gave me a variety of opportunities to work with folks. So this is month 2 for me. I've had a lot of opportunity to meet a lot of great folks, the stakeholder forum, and several of you individually on discussing different opportunities here in North Carolina. Big land base, a lot of opportunities, a lot of expectations relative to delivery of both services and recreational opportunities. And so it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed my time here to date, and look forward to meeting y'all and continue to work as we manage the National Forest lands here in North Carolina.
Very good. Roderick, I didn't know you had been in Fayetteville. Until last year, I was working with the Fayetteville Observer, and I have to say I'm also very happy to be in Asheville. That's
Exactly. You know exactly that.
Each of you touched on this a little bit, but I want to come back and go through the panel again and ask this question. In addition to what you do on a day-to-day basis, what aspects of your job do you see as the biggest challenges that you have to face on a regular basis?
You know, Roger and I were talking a little bit earlier, and at least for me, and based on our conversation, it's probably very similar. It's trying to meet expectations. There is such a wide variety of opportunities, use, and all these things have some level of trying to provide space, time, and money to be able to support these things. So for me, I think that's trying to meet the expectations and managing and, where necessary, preserving the resources that we're charged with managing.
Yeah, I think that's, I echo you completely in terms of trying to manage public space, especially in an urbanized area, because we just don't really have a lot of, we have competing needs.
Yeah.
And how do you create situations where you don't have win-lose, but it's a win-win? So bringing everybody to the table and having cooperative agreements and trying to work together to sustain a community is a challenge, because you have individual agendas with different organizations. So how do you blend those to provide for a better quality community? This is a challenge for us.
Well, we have lots of challenges too, but you know, I think one of our biggest challenges is trying to explain to the public, you know, why we do what we do, and a lot of this comes down to why do we have to manage? Why do we have to manage and do these things? And people mention the word management and administrate and all these things, and I think you know, I mentioned all the lands that we acquired, and we were getting these lands, and we drew the boundaries around them, and then we started looking inside of the boundaries, and we began seeing the many challenges that we face, because we have to go inside there and look at wildlife habitat. These are the places where wildlife live, and if we don't have those habitats or a diversity of those habitats, then the wildlife are not going to be there, or they're going to be there, or they're going to be in trouble. And we started looking, and we saw all of these invasive plants coming into our forest communities, and of all descriptions. We are looking at some of these areas that we got, and they weren't in good shape. The folks that maybe had them beforehand were cutting the wrong kinds of trees, and the stands were not in good shape. And you know, we're already down on the chestnut. The chestnut's missing, and missing components, and the hemlock is another thing. So all of these things, in some cases, these challenges to the forest. Rare habitats and things, you want to leave those things alone. Some of these require that we do things, and you know, sometimes we've made mistakes in the past, but we want to, you know, we want to do things to help make these areas better than we found them. And so the word restoration comes up, and I think that's we see that as one of our challenges. We've got these big areas, and everyone's using them, and the wildlife's trying to use them, and so just trying to get the message to the public that we're out here trying to do some things, we're out here trying to manage, and sometimes it might look a little dirty or something, but we're trying to actually, it's like refurbishing your house. For a while, it's not going to look very good. But then when you get done, it's like, holy smokes. And we hope it's the holy smokes thing at the end of it. But you know, just trying to get the message to the public that we're trying to use the best science and scientific forestry and other things. And fire is another example. A lot of these places, fire had been suppressed for a century, and that has had some major impacts that we've got to take care of these lands, and sometimes that's an active process, sometimes that's a passive process, and it's a blend of things. So.
One of the things that we've been hearing as we've looked a lot at the federal forestry issues, but I know that some of these hold true for the state and local parks as well, is there seems to be a divide. I don't know if it's among the scientists or perhaps between the scientists and some of the advocacy groups over the appropriate policy with regard to what is going to do the best for maintaining healthy habitat over time. With regard to things like fire and so on, there are some who advocate for controlled burns and for really close human management, and others who advocate for really having a very hands-off approach to keeping things natural in the natural order. There seems to be a tension, and perhaps both sides have some good points. Is that something each of you see as you look at policy making, that there is this tension out there among what is the best way to go?
Yeah, I think in the management of public lands, be it urban or state or federal, I think there is often quite a variety of opinions on what should happen where.
Yeah.
And so it's through the planning process that this forest and the stakeholder group, which I would diverge just a minute and tell you how impressed I am with the level of commitment and investment that the stakeholder forum has made here in North Carolina relative to the revision of the forest plan. It is amazing. So yes, you'll often find differences of opinion, differences of approach, and so it's the best science. Gordon and I have talked about this a little bit. You know, trying to find and apply the best science in the best places, and as far as our management allocations of land, there will be places we will do, direct work that would have some level of disturbance necessary to maintain these systems. Other places there's going to be places where we won't do anything relative to wilderness and some of these other standards where natural processes continue. So it really gives a variety of people different places to go in order to experience the things that they want to see. But yeah, there will always be a degree of difference of opinion, I believe.
Yeah, and that was just more of how we manage it in terms of being in an urban environment. Do we use pesticides? In what areas do we use pesticides, or do we just let it grow naturally and not try to manage it as much? So a lot of it is right-of-way issues too. Where do we plant edibles? How do we maintain those edible gardens? And when citizens see areas that's growing up, but it's a natural where people are growing edibles, but they're like, you need to maintain that. It needs to be cut, because you have different generations that look at things differently. Some like things to be manicured, some like things just to be natural. And you can go around Asheville, you can see that in different yards and how people maintain it. So that's been our issue, is how do we maintain public space, because we have two different philosophies on what it should look like and how it should be maintained, and then what should be allowed in those spaces.
Yeah, I think, one thing I've learned over the years, when you've had these many years, you can say over the years. So anyway, and one thing I've learned over the years is that, and I've done some work in conservation work in South America and other places too, but the common element is that successful conservation is based working with local folks, the people that are living in a particular area. You need to have that support. So when you're making these decisions, some of these are social decisions, and there's nothing wrong with that, and human objectives and things. And so these, just responding to the local folks and working with getting local support on these things is very, very important.
Very good. Alan, I want to direct a question to you and give a little background, and you can correct me if I have some of my facts wrong on this, because this is where Jack has been doing a lot of our reporting, and I've been following it some. But we have this ongoing process as the master plans are being developed for the Nantahala and Pisgah National Forest. And Jack has reported on some of the tensions, even though the stakeholders process has been very progressive and positive in many respects. There have been tensions that have erupted over some of these issues where people have honest disagreements. And there was a particular issue that arose earlier this year when a core group advocated for, and I'm trying to remember what it was called. You may be able to, the designation they wanted to go for on some of these areas that were being considered for potential wilderness. You know what I'm referencing?
I think that happened slightly before I got here, but I think perhaps there was an MOU developed, and there were some other discussions about some other allocations that have, and that name absolutely escapes me, I'm sorry.
I can't, but it was a special designation
Yes,
that
it
would have
was.
put these into these lands into a category. It wasn't wilderness, and so in a way, it was
It was a
viewed by.
I believe it was a national recreation area.
Yes, national recreation areas, yeah. And so this was gonna put these lands that are already part of the national forest into a special level of protection, but a different level than the wilderness level. What happened among the stakeholders is some of them were not involved in that MOU, and so feelings were hurt. And some stakeholders said, I don't feel like I have the trust that I had for the process as a result of that. So that's been one thing that's been going on behind the scenes. The other thing that's been happening at the same time as they've been working on this process, a number of cities and counties have weighed in and said, we have a resolution. We do not want to see any more of our area being designated as wilderness in particular. I don't know if they've all responded on the national recreation areas. And I believe we've had at least one municipality, if I remember, that went the other way and said, no, we want to see aggressive protection. And so you're getting different messages. I guess I'm interested in an update on where things stand. When can we expect to see the draft report come out? And then I'm just curious about how all these different voices are factoring into the process.
Yeah, so this is my second time through a land management process. And once again, I want to say how the foresight in using the 2012 planning rule and how this forest has adopted it using the stakeholder forum to generate ideas and kind of start looking at this spectrum of opinion and wants and desires from these two forests as we kind of go to completion. So yeah, and from my previous experience, and like I say, I've been here a couple months and had an opportunity to attend 2 of the stakeholder forums, and the opinions are very wide. And so what you see in these processes sometimes is there can be conversations had, paper generated, numbers will come out of these things, and people will latch onto these, and there will be, and sometimes they may be intended to relay one message, or perhaps are misunderstood. So it's the communication around this that can get highly varied, and people can get somewhat polarized on various pieces of this business. So I know there's resolutions that have come out. I know that that's both at the county and perhaps I've only, so yeah. So, and I think that's absolutely part of the process. And so what we have folks is that, that want continued access at the no longer, they don't want any kind of infringement on their ability for access or these other things that perhaps they've been doing for many years. And I'm kind of guessing on that piece because I would like an opportunity to meet with the counties or a subset of them to have a discussion to try to figure out relative to the plan revision. So the stakeholders have met several times, and these are 6-hour sessions, at least the ones I've been to, and there are a lot of wants and desires, opinions, and needs. And the great thing about this is that when you look at the land base about what we thought, what we've considered, both data, opinion, and to some level position, because you have to understand is in the planning thing, you can get a boatload of people that have one opinion, but this is not a looking at the issues, you're weighing them out, you're developing a series of all our iterative nature of the team and on the public on our website to be able to kind of show this process we're using. So we've taken all this stuff, and what we're going to do in May is really kind of do a sensing with the group and start trying to chart a path, making sure we're hitting the points. But at that point in time, we really have to start setting a course to get to draft, and then will be a process. This process is iterative, so as this thing develops, we'll still be management that we best sites or areas that are left in the east to give them their due shift relative to evaluation for wilderness. And so it's all part of this whole process.
By east, you mean Eastern United
Yes,
States?
sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. And so, so it's just all part of that. Say fall somewhere in there, probably
Okay.
be good. You know, I won't give you a week.
No, I understand.
Because it will change. It's already changed.
Highly probable. This is a complex process, and so you have to be thorough and you just make sure that you're representing everything. And so yeah, we're a lot more focused on content than we are on date. But this thing does have an end state, so we got to get there.
Well, in fairness to the U.S. Forest Service, there's a 2012 planning rule. This is a brand new rule for plans,
Yeah.
and this is
Him and the team have done a tremendous job of leading and guiding this effort. And I may have to go back and talk to him and get with you a little later on that.
I want to ask Gordon a question about something you mentioned in passing. You were talking about the health of some of the forests in particular. We've seen concerns certainly with chestnut and with hemlock. And we've also seen some concerns with animal species. I was I was working in another part of the state last year and was seeing a lot of press releases come out regarding the health of aquatic species in the mountains. And one of the concerns was that humans very inadvertently were contributing to, could contribute to the spread of health problems for our species. Just in the way we're talking about people fishing primarily, and the way they mishandled their lines, or they carried contamination from one stream to another, that type of thing. That's very frustrating. It seems like you want to work with the public, but you potentially have the public damaging the very parts of the natural habitat that they're appreciating and enjoying. What tools do you have other than just trying to get the word out to try to combat that kind of thing?
So, disclaimer, I am a terrestrial wildlife.
Understood.
Okay, I do the bears and all the things and the birds. And so I like the water and I fish, and I obviously work with our fish folks, but no, and actually this is something that I'm going to extend to the terrestrial area too. So, but no, we've got a series of issues, and I usually don't use notes because I think, but I'm going to use a few of these. But in our reservoirs, hydrilla, white perch, alewife, blueback, herring, spotted bass. These are some issues that are caused by people actually moving fish around. So they're taking these fish and they get done with the bait thing at the end of the day and they dump the bucket into the water, and all of a sudden we've got something that doesn't belong there. Cold water had 3 serious diseases now with our trout, and our cold water is whirling disease, which got some press just recently here. The gill lice, which we've never had in North Carolina, and we don't even know a lot about this thing here, and dynamo, which is an algae, and it's in the Tuckasegee, and just to give you an idea of what this stuff looks like, the common name is rock snot. It's not like, okay, so you've got a visual on that algae. It's not like a bear, it's not very charismatic. But no, when these things hit, especially the cold water things, the first thing that we have to do as natural resource managers is to understand the organism and just basic information. Where is it? How far is it? So the first thing with the whirling disease, we're all over the streams, we're sampling every day, we're working with partners and things to figure this out.
7 years ago, that funding for land conservation and some of the money we used to purchase some property was shrunk down because it was a dedicated funding source. So when the general system switched, they kind of took that money and started funding some other things. So it wasn't trickling down to the state park system and down to the local level. And it goes back to what you were asking about. It was a philosophical.
Yeah.
Should money be spent on conserving parkland and doing those types of endeavors? To give you an example of where it really came to head is the city of Raleigh and the state. They were closing down Dorothy Dix Hospital, And the philosophical conversation was, does it turn into a city park or does it stay state property, and how do we manage that? So that was a big struggle. But there were some other things behind that. It wasn't just about being a park. So I think that's getting at what you're saying about how that has balanced. I think that was the biggest case so far in North Carolina in terms of trying to balance out those competing needs with that.
You want to
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't point to me. I was like, next question. No, it's a very sensitive subject, and large percentage of federal or other land ownership, and so that's just a factor when you're looking at purchasing these lands. But again, I think for us, our success in our conservation efforts over the last many decades, and we brought a lot of species back, is just we work with the local citizens and respect the counties and those things there. So we are always very involved with all the players in a particular each land acquisition. It's like having a baby; each one is different there, and so it's
a new designation. There are various restrictions, controls, priorities, whatever that go with the designation. So, how does a national recreation area differ from what that land's classified now?
Mr. Craig, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take a pass on that. I've never
Okay.
worked with one of those systems, and I can't tell you one thing particularly over another. My apologies. I just don't have that experience.
Can I ask a substitute question?
Sure.
It appears, I don't have, long history with the management plan that the Forest Service is operating under, but I have been involved with the new one. It seems to me that the North Carolina Wildlife Commission and the Forest Service are cooperating and working much closer together than I have seen in the past. And is that true? And could you comment on that? Maybe Gordon, who's got the long history.
oh, thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Long history. No, I'll comment on that for sure. Way back, after all of these forests that you see around you back in 1920, around 1920 were cut, and there were little pockets of trees here and there in this whole area, and then coming out of that into the 40s and 50s, wildlife were not doing very well for a whole. I mean, there was all sorts of things, unregulated and lack of regulations and things, and so. But the Wildlife Commission was born in the late 40s, and one of the first things that we did was to have what we call wildlife management areas. And these were little pockets on the United States Forest Service land, and we put someone there 24/7 back in the all these things paying people overtime, they didn't matter. And these folks lived on there, and this is where the wildlife with our staff actively on the Forest Service land through memorandums of understanding back in 1971, and the wildlife management areas became our bear sanctuaries, and these were places that the bears hung in there for a number of years, and this is one of the reasons for the success that we've had with the return of the black bear. And so but our staff are on the Forest Service property. We participate reviewing the timber stuff. We develop joint projects together, and we also are the wildlife diversity folks. We're doing a lot of the surveys here, trying to find where a lot of these other critters are and so forth. And this is where we get a lot of the information for the forest plan, and this is why we want to see some more disturbed areas for wildlife in this go around, and so we're using all this information to put that together.
Other questions?
Please.
Doing this thing, and so be it recreation, wilderness, providing materials for industry, be it mining, there's a suite of things this agency is charged with managing. And so on different national forests, all of us are a little bit different, be it the ecology. Let's just throw the Pisgah and Nahalia. People love this place. They want a mountain bike, they want a hike, they want wilderness, they want all these other uses. We've got timber industry in the country. And so it's trying to do this allocation process of how much are we going to allow where on what kind of lands, and what are the resource values at risk. And so as we go down this road, we're constantly trying to buffer for, be it unique species or opportunities for people to visit. It's trying to keep that thing to where there's opportunities for all without losing some resource values that we just we collectively can't live without, to be quite honest with you.
You base a lot of the decisions on whether recreation is a priority or access based on the local people's opinions and input? Or is it more decided at a further up on based on the possibilities for recreation?
Cost, both monetarily and ecologically. And so I'm not giving you a really good defined answer. I realize that because it's kind of highly variable depending on what piece of the earth you're talking about. And so yeah, we try to meet the needs at the same time trying to balance out how much use can we apply on the land. Once again, this thing. So.
And there's more and more pressure on public lands to serve a lot of needs, and with some of our primary constituents, which would be the
develop a greenway where their citizens say, well, we don't want you to have access, or we don't want you to disturb the land, we want you to leave it natural. And the community is saying, we want more greenways, we want connectivity, we want to be able to have things that's connecting. And so there's a competing interest, and both have a valid point. I mean, do we protect it or do we use it to help the community grow? So it's a struggle, and especially as we only have limited facilities and availability, the scarcity of resources make it real tough to make those decisions. So you don't have that win-lose situation.
Can I follow up on that? Because we arguably saw a surprising city council race here in the city of Asheville that was highly swayed, if not based on an addition of a city park.
Exactly.
And again, it goes to like, is it really the city park we're talking about or another thing? But regardless, it came down to this park. So can you talk about what's next for that piece of land in front of the Basilica? And I know there's some folks here from Asheville. But
Yeah, correct. That initiative came out of community concern. So it wasn't something that was in the Parks Recreation Master Plan that staff was pushing forward and said, we need to make this a park. It actually was grassroots. It was the community saying, here's a piece of land. We would like to see something other than for. Then decide, is it a park, is it something else? But first, what can be accomplished with that piece of property? But it's a very, very emotional issue for the community.
How long do you think it'll take to make that decision about what?
We started a steering committee. We started 3-4 weeks ago with that. So we should be having some community meetings coming up within the next month. So hopefully, I think by December is what the Design Center is hoping to have some type of, what's the use of this space? Because it's a unique situation of what it looks like. So then once you figure out what's that space good for, then you can look at what type of activities you can put on it and what that looks like. Is it a park? Is it open space? Is it some mural? Or is it half? So that's the kind of dialogue they're looking to have.
Going back to something that was said on the previous question, I wanted just to raise a minor issue about federal lands. There is a distinction between national parks and national forests, and they have different missions.
True.
And so I assume that the answer to the question about what do you prioritize is going to be a little bit different depending on whether you're talking about forests or parks.
Yes, because as you pointed out, the missions are somewhat different.
Yeah.
Our approaches to access or use of land or non-use, just so that everything is kind of staying in sync with kind of the natural processes. So yeah, you will see this variation across a wide variety of public lands as to how we.
And I guess the state has the same issue. There are state parks and state forests.
And then, and again, it's very, very important to distinguish. And with the national parks and the U.S. Forest Service, or whether it's game lands or state parks, state parks are they're more recreationally oriented, and you're not going to see hunting there. You're probably
Not legally.
Huh?
Not legally.
Yeah, but although some state parks in some states you do see some of that. But and then active management. the timber industry and forestry and other active things there. You might see some burning. We do a lot of joint projects with the state parks to burn on their properties too. So, but yeah, there can be big differences,
Yeah.
and each one has its own purpose, and this is great. And so, but you know, the national forests are they're working forests. They're multiple use, and they're trying to, like I say, they've got a really complex mission, and you try to find those balances. I think that is the real trick that Mr. Nicholas has to work on.
Right here.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first actually has to do with these parallel plans. So you've mentioned the greenway planning that is going on. It's been very comprehensive, as well as the forest management, not mentioned. And is there any connected plans, whether it's recreation or
down through Asheville, keep going south. That's a movement at the state level. So I think you're going to see more of that in the future. We're working with the county now to look at how the greenways plans match up and link up, so that you have more connectivity, so that you can actually travel through. And it makes sense to try to do the best you can. Some will be paved, some will be natural. It's going to be a trade-off just based off the area. But the Mountain Sea Trail goes all the way through North Carolina. That was the first initiative, and I think you're going to see more of that, the regional type of planning.
and then the forest management plan is they're also reaching out, or you got, obviously you'd have a lot of different municipalities you have to reach out to for that.
Yeah, and I think what like I say, you'll have to forgive me, I'm probably not as knowledgeable as I should be on this, but historically what we're doing is we're trying to engage anybody who wants to come to the table on this, because there's the social economic piece of the forest plan that everybody's paying attention to. So you've got communities like Brevard, you've got Hot Springs, you've got all these communities that are around that are linked either through tourism, direct connectivity, like with Hot Springs, the AT comes through there. So it's all these things that are out there. So we're looking about, well, what resources are these communities using? Is it a discussion around water? Is it a discussion around access, recreation, tourism? And so yeah, we're looking across these boundaries and trying to see, okay, what type, from the plan standpoint, what are the outputs, opportunities that this plan needs to address, so that either connectivity can be made or what's there is maintained, or looking for new opportunities across a suite of different folks. So, but likewise, the city managers and leaders can always come to the table and present things about, well, this is who we are, where we are, this is the connection we're trying to make. And so in broad general terms, not project specific, the plan would try to wrap that into the discussion about, well, here's an intent, here's an intention to try to do things, because even without the plan stuff, there's opportunities when you start talking about urban opportunities and environments and what our agency is able to bring to the table. I think, because we were going to talk and get together a little bit, just say, well, what does that look like? So,
but over the last 10 years, it's been a concentrated, intentful effort to plan more on a regional basis. So we have a lot of opportunities now that years ago we just missed those low-hanging fruit. So you'll see that a lot more going forward. Just because, with the economy downturn a few years ago, it just forced us to look at different ways to operate and how can we maximize, because the citizens still would like to have the same services provided. So how do we manage that, and how do we maximize it to the fullest?
And part of the 2012 planning rule is, the Forest Service has this all lands approach, and so they're looking, and if you look at some of their planning documents from 3 years ago, they're looking at the whole area when they're looking at the forest inventories and all of these other things. So they really, with the new planning process, are to be engaging and considering these things. But you also mentioned the wildland urban interface, the WUI, W-U. You gotta have acronyms when you're doing with this public land stuff. I'm sorry, but that is another challenge in the public land management field, because as more and more people pack in around the public areas, that has impacts, and so you start isolating the areas, and then there are certain restrictions on some of the things that you can and can't do. For example, fire, and so you've got a lot of folks around there. You're not going to burn up to the fire. That's going to limit the smoke, and you've got the smoke thing going on there. So that in some cases may take a very important management tool off the table. From a wildlife perspective, when people move in, they bring dogs and cats and all sorts of things that eat bird nests and then all sorts of other things that go on in there. And then the raccoons and the possums, and they like the backyards too, and they also eat eggs, by the way. And so then we have a whole host of areas. So your area that we can manage for wildlife, and that we're trying to create these habitats and disturbed habitats and so forth. These areas need to be away from these things that are causing so many of the problems out on the private lands. So that whole wildland urban interface, and they've got a whole document, Forest at the Edge. You can look that up on the Forest Service website, Forest at the Edge, and it's talking about all of these things that are around the edges of the forest, and it's a big deal, and we all should be. I've almost never said that in my 34 years, but that's all going down east of my director and all that, and I can't. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about that.
Well, I mean, I will say one thing, not particularly on what you guys were saying, but the red wolf. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when Heath Schuler was in office, we actually allocated funds to the Nature Center so that we could house some red wolves.
That's right.
To do that. So we were thankful to be able to be a part of that conversation and offer the facilities to do that.
That's right. I forgot about that.
As you talk about that interface, I'm curious. I know I've lived other places where a big concern, particularly a concern that affected some sensitive species, was ferals. And you had, one place I lived in Florida, we had endangered scrub jays, and they were threatened by the feral cat colonies that some people wanted to protect, and nobody could figure out what the right policy was. It was really a tough issue. I don't know if we have that here in any significant way or not. Are you guys seeing that kind of issue?
No, we're running into the feral thing in certain
Yeah.
places too, and I know down east we've had some places where we've had some endangered birds and things like that. It's very tricky.
Yeah.
Very tricky situation. But it's happening, and these animals are just doing their thing. They need to eat and so forth, but they're nobody's pets. But they're out there, and they can have. And then people do feed them. People might go out there and feed the feral animals. So they're getting this energy source, and so they can have impacts that a normal natural predator would not have, who has to really depend on the food that it catches to eat. And so these are big, and some of these studies, it's amazing impacts that these things that animals can have.
Yes.
So you all spoke to community-based and relationship-based decision-making, but I was wondering how each of your agencies might be engaging communities that might be politically disenfranchised or disadvantaged. How do you make sure that their voices are heard?
I'll start.
Oh, please.
Local level first. Historically, we've provided input sessions. We put out the flyers, put out the press release, invite the community to come in. Then we'll put up the boards, put the dots up, and say, hey, give us some input, give us feedback. Then we'll come back and say, here's what you said. And then that creates a dynamic situation between, that's not what I put on the board, but that's what he put on the board. So what we're trying to do now is move to more of an engagement type of process where the citizens are leading the process and determining together as a community what they would like to see versus the staff coming back saying, here's your choices. So it's more of engaging across the board, because we do have some communities that don't speak up, and we have some that speak up more than their fair share. They speak up for everybody else at the same time. So to balance it out, how do you do that? Because not every area, especially in an urbanized area, not every area is the same. So how do you make that program?
So we can inch up to the state, and then we'll go federal. So we have everybody. This is the day and age of public participation, and the Wildlife Commission does that. I mean, historically, every year in January we have 9 public hearings, and folks can go there. It's to comment on our regulations, but we have an open session, and we field all sorts of things there. But in related to our public lands, we have gone through a process now of updating our management plans. And so we have had a very intensive process of rewriting all these plans, and it has a huge public involvement part of this. And we just finished this on Green River game land down there. And we're encouraging all sorts of other uses, as long as we're taking care of the wildlife and the hiking and everything, and working with lots of groups. But as far as you mentioned disadvantage and so forth, in our agency, it's the working with the disabled sportsmen and the veterans, and we've got just incredible programs to help the disabled folks get behind some of the gates, using the track chairs, having areas designated. We have special assisted hunts, very, very intensive hunts and things there. But a lot of our focus there is the disabled community, and we've got some great programs, a lot of sportsman participation. The sportsmen, again, rise to the occasion and help us to raise all this money and help us out. So we're very engaged in that process. And we do the disabled sportsmen with the Forest Service stuff also.
So, pardon me, so relative to communities, the stakeholder group is one representation of a group of people that have common interests or ideas or however that works out. So when you think about decision levels, you've got the forest plan as kind of an overarching document that would be that I would eventually end up signing. But so the implementation of that goes down to the ranger districts, or the individual district rangers that will probably have, well, I know better than I, a real beat on communities, who people are, where they reside. And so historically what I've seen is some really direct outreach, wanting to understand who people are in communities. We're talking, we're access on the web, people can come in. And so you can do direct outreach, but sometimes it's hard to get people to engage. I'll be real honest with you. You'll just get a very small subset of folks that'll show up on any one particular issue, which is fine. That's the nature of the beast. But we do try to do outreach across kind of a wide variety of different communities.
I mean, there were places that were 100 people, a lot of local folks coming in there. So they're with the.
Do we need to have another round versus just we're gonna have 3 meetings on this, and then here's when we're gonna make the decision about, here's what the plan is coming out, here's when the final draft is coming out. So instead of having those preset timelines, just do it organically as you go through the process, so that it gives time for people to come in and come out. It takes a little longer, but I think that's gonna try to get us a better product, at least get more